Welcome to the Hybrid Helix Consulting Podcast, where we're reimagining business for a better world. Today is our first episode where we'll cover a lot of different fun topics that we'll into in a minute. In the meantime, know that we will be uploading this to YouTube as a podcast. So if you enjoy it, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave us some comments if you like. And other than that, hope you enjoy the episode. Hi there. So my name's Andrew Cordova-Andrews. I usually go by ACA, or some people call me Ethan. I want to start this off by giving you guys an introduction to who Hybrid Helix is, who I am, and what we're doing to reimagine business for a better world. So I'll give you a little bit about myself, and I'll tell you a little bit about my partners, and a little bit about what we've been doing now, and where my background is, and from there I'll transition into some of the topics of this first podcast, which really focuses around current world events, and corporate responsibility, and how the challenges that we see in our democracy right now here in America are really, really, really toxic to business, but also to the people that are impacted. And I think that a lot of the business world that we've grown up and lived up in has been created off of just kind of older structures, and a lot of people don't understand how some of those structures end up influencing the people that are decision makers, and how that ultimately ends up creating a worse society for us, not only by not understanding it, but also by not trying to do something against it. So, to give you a little bit about me and where things are in my life, I'm a business consultant by trade. I've been doing that for the past 5 or 6 years, and I mainly focus on helping visionaries build their dream. Figure out where they're either lacking in resources or technical expertise, or even if it's just goal planning and figuring out how to build their business. That's where I focus a lot of my time. I do that through helping with marketing, operations, technology solutions, and over the past 5-6 years since we were founded in 2018, we've been working on growing and enhancing not only the internal processes that we use, but trying to build a service that is truly valuable not only to small businesses but to larger enterprises as well. It's through that work that I believe we've gained some more of the expertise to try and do what we're going to be doing with what we call the hashtag Change Tank initiative. And I'll go a little bit more details on that a little bit later in this podcast. A lot of that will be probably reserved for another episode. Yeah. So in terms of my background beyond business consulting, I did have a 13-year career in corporate America. I worked at three very large corporations over the course of 13, maybe almost, I guess, 16 years if you go back to when I was working at a movie theater when I was 16. But really my expertise through that took me into call centers. And talking to people was something that didn't come naturally to me as a I don't know, I guess I was kind of like a video game nerd. But I was always trying to create things, and I created kind of a side hustle web hosting business at one point, and eventually that didn't work out, and so eventually I found myself working at one of the large telecom carriers, and that was a fairly good experience for 9 years, being able to see the inner workings of a corporation, and what they do well and what they do poorly. Ultimately, is one of the reasons why I had left that, just to go into a higher position. I had finally elevated past a kind of like a temporary supervisor to a permanent supervisor role at the next position that I held. And when I was working for that even larger corporation, I was really astounded by the level of autonomy that they'd given their leadership team in order to make things better for everyone. And so that inspired me. There were things, of course, they didn't do as well as the telecom company, but being able to kind of see where they were deficient and be able to bring my expertise really allowed me to make a difference there. And I remember one of the most important things that I learned there is the importance of servant leadership. If you haven't heard it before, it's basically where you as a leader, your job is just to empower your team to do their best. Whether that's tools, resources, helping them with projects, whatever it is that would make them successful. And in doing so and in empowering your team in that way, I've been able to accomplish things that I wouldn't otherwise think possible. So that's the type of leadership style I carry forward. Um, I have four partners, four total partners, including myself, in our operation right now. A lot of the project work and stuff like that that we do hire contractors, 1099 work and stuff, but we hope to grow it much larger soon. And I'll introduce Aaron and Raina and Luis in future episodes. I'm sure they're going to be on this this series, so you can expect them there. So I guess this is a good time to kind of segue into my next topic, which really is what we focused this podcast on is trying to figure out how can we share our ideas with the world, but more importantly, open up a forum for discussion where we can all discuss what's going on in the current world, where maybe some of my insight and my team's insight may be able to help us understand it better. But then, more importantly, see if we can actually work together as a community to make a difference. And there's things that we're not going to be able to change, but I believe there's a lot that we can. And, it's the greatest illusion that humanity has any limitations. So let's try and make a difference. So, our first topic today comes down to an article that I read. And the article that I read just the other day, it came out, I believe, in the Atlantic. I'll make sure to link in the description. But essentially, it was talking about how we've seen a lot of the corporate CEOs, getting really close to the current administration, and a lot of them were even in aren't even in the process of like completely reneging or changing the positions that they held before. And a lot of that, it's interesting because I feel like no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you want to believe that there's a separation between the public, private, and the sectors. That obviously, the government sector is very specialized. They have a lot of requirements, regulations, and things that have been built because this is the way that seems to help as many people as they can. And that's not true for all of the government, but a majority of it has a lot of dedicated civil servants that do a lot of good work for us. Um, and on the flip side of that, you expect America to kind of stay out of affairs with companies for the most part. Obviously, they need to regulate, especially when it comes to safety, when it comes to climate change and things like that. I believe there's a place where regulation helps. Just the very fact that we have warning labels that tell us of some of the dangers of things that would you would think are otherwise benign has probably saved countless lives. But it's interesting, like there's lots of areas that can get controversial and things like that. Back to this article, and I sometimes get on side tangents. So the article was explaining that there was someone who reported that Trump had met with Mark Zuckerberg and basically told him that if he doesn't comply with what he wants from them, that he's going to find himself in jail. Let that sit with you for a second. It's interesting. To me, my understanding is that president has absolutely no authority to launch an investigation outside of maybe like starting and requesting a commission and national emergencies and dealing within the inner workings of our democracy. So, hearing that is pretty shocking, and seeing, kind of what they're trying to do with the Justice Department is pretty shocking. I know that a lot of people have a lot of bias and even controversial opinions about the prosecution of Trump, but it's interesting because I looked into it with as many professional lawyer content creators that I could. I wanted to try and understand every avenue of the investigation to make sure that what is actually going on. And I'm going to tell you what. I mean, the origins of this investigation and all the investigations that went into him came from legitimate sources. The way the investigation is done, were done properly. A lot of the filing documentation and the reports that you can read, like the was it Robert Mueller and Jack Smith. Their reports are very telling, very shocking. And I know as an American, you probably don't have a lot of time to actually sit there and read like 178 pages. I know I've imported it into a tool called Margin Note and try to break apart, some of the pieces of it that really are really telling. But the biggest thing to understand is that if a law is on the books, Congress or state legislatures, they've basically determined that that shouldn't happen in America. And the problem with, you know, that is obviously that if laws aren't being obeyed, then the rule of law deteriorates. And it's interesting because when we talk about the rule of law, that's what I've always admired about the business environment here in America is that the way the rule of law works is there's a very standard set of rights and things that you have, which protect you from being arbitrarily targeted. And if you were arbitrarily targeted, it would quickly fall apart in the court system. I do believe that the court system and working with individuals, would still find itself standing up. The way that the court system works is just completely untouchable from the administration's perspective. Um, but that being said, there's I guess what I'm trying to get to is that if we have a world where CEOs are being threatened by the president of the United States, then that is something that's very closely tied with socialism. It takes us very far away from capitalism. Takes us much closer to even fascism. Socialism has a very close influence over what businesses can and cannot do, and they usually express that influence just through being the arm of the government. In a more direct and kind of authoritarian type of way. We also see this in communism, and obviously is a problem. It's a problem to have a single person being able to have that much power over a group of people, and it's not what we believe in here in America. You don't see companies dissenting against the Chinese government. And that's simply because the way that they've designed their government has essentially given the type of power to the government to not provide individual liberties, to not comply with the laws that are on their books, and to make decisions that ultimately result in poor outcomes. So I guess where I'm going with that is I'm gonna kind of segue into where not only those current events impact like CEOs and their decisions, but where the corporations place their responsibility, which a majority of the time they have a fiduciary responsibility directly to the shareholders, and that's very true for all C corps. And if I could tell you, when I was completing my master's in business administration, it was really eye opening to learn something near the very end of my degree. I think it was like one of the last two classes. And essentially, what it was is I learned that that fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders is really taken to the extreme. So you basically have an unlimited obligation to ensure that you're making shareholders as much money as possible. If you're not, you can be sued, and you could lose that lawsuit. Try and go and donate $150 million project to random community, or something big towards society, without it having a clear path to making the shareholders more money. You're going to find yourself a big lawsuit. And that's often why you see just these very negligible amounts donated to charities, 10 million here, 5 million there, usually less than a million in most cases. And you see like a lot of corporations trying to show that they do care about, society, because, doing so will, allow more people to feel comfortable shopping with them. And they'll do stuff like support donations to somewhere else via partnership. But a lot of those motivations to do so don't come from the impact that it's going to have on the consumer and their bottom line, through how they feel about the company. It comes from government incentives, tax breaks, ways to pay less money and make more money, and thus help the shareholders. And that essentially becomes the crux of the situation. Um, I think that the solution to this is very complicated, because you look at companies that have hit the headlines lately, like United Healthcare. They lost their CEO. He was assassinated, and you feel how the public feels against the insurance system, with how they reacted, to the killer. And for me, I'm always of the belief that violence is only a tool that is employed by small children and very large nations, because it's the last resort. It's like, why choose that when there's other ways to approach it. But I am happy that the conversation in society was had, because I think it's very, very, very important for us to understand, what motivates a CEO. And I know that, at least from the reporting that I've read, that any particular like appeal or denial cases that actually ended up making it to the CEO, were usually handled by the moment they either hit the headline, or the moment they got on the CEO's desk, because otherwise he didn't know that this was happening. The day-to-day work is so far below. Does that change where the accountability should be? I don't know. I think that the legal system putting the accountability to making as much money as possible is definitely an undue influence, just as much as it would be for the president to tell you how to set the policy in your company. But that, unfortunately, is what happens in other countries. China to be the notable one, but probably not the only one. So yeah, just something to think about. In terms of solutions, there are some awesome business structures and ways that you could go about things. And because we're the United States of America, I'm a huge fan of some of these. Because we can essentially, you can set up a company however you want. The corporate bylaws and how you operate your company. There's templates. There's lawyers that do this day in, day out. There's firms that do this day in, day out, and they have very standard structures, and they're always structured in the same way. The founders, the owners, the people that started the company, they're in control of everything, and that's just how it works. And it's the way we've done business for so many years and decades, centuries. It just hasn't made sense to change a lot of that. And one of the things that changed it is the idea of B Corps. And you can be a B Corp, and I'm pretty sure you could be registered anywhere, through whatever LLC or C Corp registration your state offers. But states that offer it on the books are awesome, and then states that don't, there are ways to design your bylaws towards it. But a B corporation, it stands for benefit corporation. And essentially what it does is it squarely places the fiduciary responsibility um, on all stakeholders, to all stakeholders. And that shifts it from just to shareholders. And what it does is it includes the community, especially the communities that they're impacting. And it also includes their team. The unfortunate thing is that with some of the B Corps and the way that they've been designed, they do, a lot of them make a difference, a really big impact, um, just in the way they make their decisions and the way things go down. But I met a lawyer here, out in New Mexico, that had worked with many companies that were looking to become B Corps, and he was kind of fed up with the attitude that so many of them came in with, which was really focused on how being a B Corp could make them more revenue, but wasn't as focused on actually doing what the ethical underlines of a B Corp are about. Um, didn't get any specifics as far as like names or anything, but I thought it was very interesting because, we're talking about corporations that are supposed to be doing better, and are they greenwashing us? Are they pretending to do better but not helping society? And why is this pattern keep repeating? And so yeah, so my team doesn't necessarily have everything figured out, but what we do have figured out, I think, is very important to understand. Um, what we want to do is we want to build something called the Change Tank. The Change Tank is a framework, and I guess I would call it like an accountability system, but it's more than that. It's an accountability ethics, a system to help create generational wealth, a system to help support team members in bringing their ideas to life, and there's a lot of components to it that I think in this episode would be very hard to go into great detail in. But what I know is that um, we need more people trying to make a difference. And the Change Tank is intended to overlay on top of a B Corp. And it's essentially intended to help create a transparent layer of ethics and accountability, while also instilling the values of our country, democracy, democratic decision making, and leadership, while also providing for generational wealth based on your actual contributions. And so, yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. And I have a fairly detailed structure designed that we're going to be kind of outlining entirely in a white paper, but it's the start to what ultimately we hope will become the future of business. Imagine businesses that donate 25% of their revenue towards helping in social missions, to try and make an impact, whether it be climate change mitigation or homelessness or animal welfare. And these are all areas that I feel very personally driven by. Climate change, just seeing how hot summers have gotten here in New Mexico versus where they were when I was young. Um, I worry about my son and family coming to me in the future that, they're not going to have the same opportunities to enjoy Earth as we did. And that's unfortunate. And I feel like I want to make the biggest monetary and resource contribution towards trying to make for a planet that can give my kids the same experience I had on Earth, at least with nature and the planet and clean air, clean water, those types of things. We can be sustainable. It's just a matter of finding out how to implement that into society properly. At the end of the day, it's going to be companies need to make smarter decisions, decisions that are in line with the impacts that they could have on the environment and decisions for the impacts they have in society. Um, One thing that I feel like I didn't cover very well in terms of explaining the fiduciary responsibility that I think is very important to understand as well. It was back, I believe it was during Reagan's time. It may not have been. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of stock buybacks is very interesting. And I think that when we made them legal, because they were illegal beforehand, the intention was to try and increase American prosperity. And prosperity on the stock market certainly increased. But at the same time that we made that change, we also saw another line change. Whereas we saw wage growth in the United States on a consistent upward trajectory, in line with the Industrial Revolution, and technology is starting to come out, getting better. Ways of being efficient, ways of doing business. Things were invented. Lots of things happened. But all of a sudden, wage growth just flatlined on that chart from that time forward. And it's because instead of investing in the people to produce a better result, to try and drive more business in order to reflect better on their stock price and ultimately increase everybody's economic security and wealth and difference, um, they would focus only on one thing. That's the fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They have to do everything they can to do that. So what do? Rather than invest in the non-tangible, which is investing in employee bonuses and raises and training and leadership and development, and maybe even new products, things like that. They would just throw their money on the stock market, gamble it essentially, buy back their own shares, spend billions of dollars doing so that could have definitely made a better impact than that. And it goes up, and investors are happy, and people aren't quitting in mass. They seem to be okay making their meager wages, so nothing changes. And that's what's happening in corporate America right now. And I do think, obviously, there needs to be reform over the financial markets, and making stock buybacks illegal again, I think would make a big difference. But in terms of actually getting there, that's going to be a whole other political mine hole to go through. So, what I want to do is I want to make companies better, and change tank companies would not be allowed to do stock buybacks if they go public at all. The way that they're going to be designed are going to be very carefully crafted, to make sure that they benefit everyone inside of the business and the people that they're affecting more than anything else. And ultimately, I believe that that's going to create um, such a business environment that maybe one day it would be unprofitable to run your business any other way than a change tank. And if we can make an impact like that, then I would say I've definitely succeeded in my mission. So that's what I'm about. I'll give you some idea of like the reason why I want to build something like this. It really comes down to my personal experiences. I there are some amazing nonprofits that helped me through uh, really difficult situations. I had a malicious landlord right after my son was born, decide to ask us to leave because my lawyer realized that they were trying to defraud the emergency rental assistance program that we were on at the time, by charging us month to month fees when we had a lease, we had a signed lease. And obviously not having the resources at the time to be able to fight it, we ended up living in hotels, and going between mainly hotels. Some family couches and stuff helped out every now and then, but I was essentially raising my now 2 month old. He was 2 months old at the time, I think, when we had to leave, and we were raising him out of hotels because of that. And we were super grateful for the program, helping us to pay for that and to go through that. But what I was even more grateful for were the nonprofits that came to help us near the end of the program, that helped us find landlord that would actually allow us to move in. We owed a debt to that nefarious landlord, obviously showing on all of our credit reports. We're not able to get it off. We did manage to eventually get it off of our credit reports, but it wasn't through anything that happened quickly. It was an ongoing challenge. and seeing that I could end up homeless. I'd never been homeless up until that point. I think it happened right after I turned 30. Um, it was wild. I had a corporate career my whole life. I had made all the best decisions I could, to make sure that I was okay financially. And, suddenly, we find ourselves going homeless because, we asked for them to help fix a mistake on, the billing for our lease. And, we uncovered something that, clearly was nefarious, and they thought it was better to kick us out and let us deal with those financial problems, and that would reduce the likelihood of them being sued. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
Now you know about Hyperhelix Consulting and what me and my team are doing in order to try and make a difference. We've only started at the very beginning of our journey right now. But anybody who joins us and likes, subscribes, we appreciate you and just for being here as part of our community because at the end of the day, this isn't going to be possible without an actual group effort to really make a difference. So, over the next few episodes, I expect to get more understanding of what the change shank is. We'll continue to assess current developments and how they impact business and the world that we work that we all work and live in. And if you guys have questions, comments, feel free to leave them on the channels, and we'll catch you in the next episode.